Man, this is Deion Dawkins, man. You're listening to The Scoop on OwlScoop.com. You already know.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to The Scoop, OwlScoop.com's weekly podcast. We are on to episode 24 of season 10. I'm OwlScoop.com editor John DeCarlo. We've got a full house today of Kyle Gauss and Johnny Zawizlak, and a member of the family has come back. Look at that handsome face and the hair. Dante Collinelli, deputy editor of the 33rd team, is with us on this week's episode to talk a little Temple football. Did a great job of breaking down Tyler Walker's offense, the offense that we think he's going to bring to Temple from Montana State. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great. It's an honor to be back. I'm very flattered that you guys were like, we need a real sicko to watch the Montana State film, and I was the first name that popped into your head. I'm assuming I'm the first name. Yeah.
Legitimately. It's like, who's crazy enough to do this? Who would appreciate this enough? Dante. Dante would love doing this.
I appreciate it. That's like probably the best compliment I could get at this point in my career. So
Well,
I'm very flattered.
Just the memories of you watching film in the Temple News office with like a furrowed brow, like you would have different expressions, and then you would try to explain to young writers like what the different what tools he meant, what different he's got tools, he's got skills, what fluid hips meant, like all this stuff, and like just these scouting terms, and just I don't know, miss it. So yeah, it's wonderful to have you back on the Scoop. We are looking forward to a packed episode for you guys this week. A great podcast. If you're down about Temple's loss at ECU Wednesday night, we hear you, but we'll cheer you up again with a lot of interesting football news on the staff front and the recruiting front. There's a Big Ten transfer quarterback on campus right now as we speak, a four-star cornerback who committed this week, and a dynamic offensive coordinator on the board with Tyler Walke. And again, Dante is going to help us understand what his offense could look like at Temple. Diane Richardson's women's basketball team picked up an overtime win on the road Wednesday night at FAU, and has really started to get some solid contributions from Alabama A&M transfer Kaylah Turner, who was big in that win. We'll get to all of your mailbag questions as well. The Scoop, as always, is brought to you by Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. If you've been injured while on the road or the highway and the crash was someone else's fault, the insurance company will not be on your side. You need us. Temple Law grads will fight hard to get the compensation that you deserve. We only get paid if we win, so in Pennsylvania or New York, call us today at 215-261-7359. It's 215-261-7359, and you can find them on the web at greenspans-law.com, greenspans-law.com. You'll hear from Mike Greenspan later on as he provides his tip for drivers to stay safe on the road as we get to the mailbag. Declan is not with us again, has moved on. I mean, he's still with us as a human being.
It sounds like he's dead.
He's dead, man. Keep making it sound like he's dead, John.
Moved on to his full-time advising role at the Klein College of Media and Communication. Still going to be doing a lot of freelance work. And so Dante, one of the things that Declan helped us develop was a little segment called Honor Around the State. We did not do this when you were on the OwlScoop staff, so it's a little fun.
Giving him credit for developing this concept is wild. Like, people have always done on this date.
He developed the OwlScoop version of it. Trying to just throw Declan a little bone here. Yeah, basically just goes to the internet and looks at things that happen on this date or famous birthdays. So just kind of just priming things here for Dante so he knows what this is. So Johnny is taking it over now. So it's almost
This
like
for January 10th?
Yes, we're doing January 10th.
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't say 5 years ago today, I became a father. It was my son's 5th birthday.
Oh,
Wow.
birthday, Jordan.
Shout out Jordan.
Yes.
Shout out Jordan.
Hey, buddy. So yeah, Dante, this is basically like a little short version of Quizzo before we get into talking Temple sports. So I hope this is everything you dreamed it would be.
Oh, I'm sure it will be.
That was a lot to live up to, John. I'm gonna have to, try and do a good job here. But Dante, since you're here, I'm gonna ask you: do you want to start with birthdays or do you want to start with events that happen on January 10th?
Oh man, I'm not going to be able to get either, but let's go with events.
Ooh. Events, all right.
Little curveball. There we go.
Yeah.
Yes. Normally we start with birthdays, but I like the change up. I like the change.
Already Dante spicing things up. It's good.
Yeah, I like it.
We became complacent.
On January 10th of 1999, the first episode of this famous crime drama series about a New Jersey Italian mobster aired its first series and episode. It starred James Gandolfini and
Oh,
Oh,
Johnny. Oh, no.
I
on the
tried. I
a little on
tried.
the nose. We
Couple-
bring in Dante on this, and you go
Couple
straight for
things
the
here.
Sopranos.
Yes, couple things here.
That's the
Number
best
one,
one. That's the best one of the events.
Johnny goes, oh, Dante Collinelli's going to be joining John DiCarlo on the scoop this week. Might as well start with a Sopranos question.
That's not how it is at all. That is probably one of the most famous thing on here. that
I
happened.
know, like
Not a lot happened on January 10th, John. Not a lot happened.
so
Other than
famous.
Jordan's birthday. Other than Jordan's birthday, which I didn't know prior to this, I would have put it on there.
We've got Johnny off schedule already. He's like a
I mean,
quarterback,
I
but
feel
he's
like I'm
got a
taking a lot of heat here for something. I mean, the Sopranos is highly regarded as one of the best
Yeah,
TV.
but then you butchering Gandolfini's last name didn't help.
I tried my best.
James
I tried.
Rutgers
Gandolfini
alone.
is up in heaven, just
Rutgers alone.
eating a long hot right now and just scowling at you.
I tried my best.
Dante, a little inside baseball. You can't push Johnny too much, or I'll just go into his shell for the rest of the episode. So we gotta,
Okay,
we gotta peel back a little bit.
Okay, that used to be the case. I feel like I'm better with that now.
New year, new Johnny.
That used to be
Okay.
the case.
All right.
He's
We're-
like Dante. Would you say Johnny's like a quarterback with just like happy feet in the pocket right now? He's just a little off schedule.
It's all right. You know, some people do their best work off schedule.
There we
Those are
go.
the best passers in the NFL can do it off schedule. So
There we go.
don't let
I'm
that knock
gonna,
you off
I'm
your
gonna
game.
try and live up to that. We're gonna obviously everyone got that one. We're gonna move to the next one. On this day and on January 10th of 1776, Thomas Paine published this 50-page pamphlet that sold more than 500,000 copies within the first few months and called for war of independence that would become the American Revolution.
Common sense.
Common sense, yeah.
That is correct. The last event that we have is on this day in 1946, the first United Nations General Assembly met in this famous city. It's in Europe.
Zurich.
No. It's the largest city of both England and the UK.
London.
Correct. I honestly, I didn't know what other hint to give for the city.
No,
It's known for its
Give it away.
bridges.
I feel like that also would have given it away.
known
No,
for its
good
known for its
answer.
fog,
Yeah.
Fair.
known for calling.
Known for its raincoats.
Yeah.
All right,
Also,
we're gonna move to birthdays now. On January 10th of 1949, this American boxer was born. He was the world heavyweight champion twice, once from 1973 to 1974, and also from 1994 to 1995. When he regained the heavyweight title at age
Wow.
45, he was the oldest world heavyweight champion.
also became very big with infomercials
Was it
and
George
selling a
Foreman?
product that can sizzle something in your bed.
George Foreman.
Yeah.
George Foreman.
Yes, George Foreman.
Did you guys
On-
ever have were George Foreman girls pretty much extinct?
I
by-
brought one to my freshman dorm at Temple, J&H. I had a George Foreman grill. I used it to make paninis.
My
I would
dad
go
had
down. I would
one.
go to J&H. I'd go down to J&H immediately. Fourth meal. I'd take an entire bag of bread. I'd empty it. I'd make just cold sandwiches, and I'd take them upstairs in the thing of bread and just warm them up, make little paninis. I did that twice a week for an entire year.
Dante,
That
did you do
rocks.
that too?
No, I did not. I did not have the foresight. My dad did have a George Foreman grill though when I was growing up. So.
It's a perfectly fine product. It's just
I
a
agree.
panini press. That's all it is. It's just a panini press. It's just he put his name on it.
I vividly remember my parents having a George Foreman grill when I was growing up too, but that's basically I haven't seen one in years now at this
Yeah.
point.
No, for sure. I don't know. Mine, I assume, is gone.
My buddy Eric, I just thought of this, once said to me years ago, he was living in an apartment complex and he said, come on over, we'll throw some stuff on the grill. It's like, that
Oh, man.
sounds great. I get in and I said, I didn't think your apartment complex allowed you to have a grill. He's like, they don't. I meant on the George Foreman grill. I was like, oh man. I mean,
You can also just make a steak on your stove. Like,
I was thinking more of like a festive grill atmosphere, the smells, the sights, and he's like, no, I'm just gonna put this on the George Foreman grill. I was like, okay.
you're gonna watch.
Yeah, like we should have just gone out.
In fairness, though, the George Foreman grill on a steak, you can cook both sides at the same time. Probably a
Yeah,
little quicker. You
Yeah.
can close it.
there we go.
All right, we're gonna move on to the next one. On January 10th of
Today's word of the day is called segue.
I didn't know how to segue out of that.
Yeah.
On January 10th, 1924, this American jazz drummer and composer was born, one of the most influential and widely recorded modern percussionists. Grew up in New York City, performed with Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, had a quintet with trumpeter Clifford Brown. Initials are MR.
Maya Rudolph.
No.
Can you give us the first name?
Max.
Max Weinberg.
R.
Oh, R.
You think Max Weinberg's 101 years old?
Never mind. I completely lost sight of when the year was. Get
Like, I know the East Street Band's getting up there, but
so bad.
Um,
The little drummer boy.
Max Roach.
never heard of him.
Didn't know.
No.
I didn't know who he was before this either. Like I said, not a lot of birthdays.
Hmm.
We're gonna move to the next one. On January 10th of 1936, this American radio astronomer was born. He shared the 1978 Nobel Prize for Physics with Arno Penzias for a discovery that supported the Big Bang model of creation. He also shares part of his name with the 28th President of the United States.
Do any of us know who the 28th president of the United States was off the top of our head?
Wilson?
Yes, but it's the Woodrow is the middle name, not the first name.
Wow, that's impressive.
I worked backwards. I have no idea.
Robert Woodrow Wilson.
Great.
Hmm.
Happy birthday, Rob.
Again, not a lot of. This is the last one. This one's a more modern. That I didn't find on Britannica. I had to look up famous birthdays because there was literally no good birthdays. On January 10th of 1958, the mother of pop country music sensation was born. Her daughter is one of the top artists in the nation right now.
Taylor Swift's mom's name is
Andrea Swift.
Andrea. She was dealing with breast cancer, I think, at one point, but I believe
Yeah.
she's getting better.
Oh, I
Yes,
didn't know that.
yes,
Yeah.
she's getting better now. But yeah, that was on or around this day.
What'd you think?
I think it's a nice addition. I like it. I like it.
Tried my best. I feel like
like
every time I'm doing this, there's not a lot to work with, and every
You
time.
gotta get swings in the batting cage. We can change. Well, in fairness, we change the recording date like every week, so you can't really plan ahead.
Exactly. I
Yeah.
can't prepare.
Yeah.
But I just gotta go through the motions, like you said, get in the batting cage. This is only my second time doing it, so I feel like as I continue throughout the weeks, I'm just gonna continue to get better.
Getting better.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate Johnny.
Thank you.
As promised, we are going to talk to Dante Collinelli about this offense that Tyler Walke will be likely to bring with him to Temple. So again, Tyler Walke, the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at Montana State, which just played for the FCS National Championship and lost to North Dakota State it was Monday night, correct? Yeah. So put up a lot of points, ultimately did not win, but an interesting hire for Temple here. Dante, you wrote about this. Again, if you're an OwlScoop.com subscriber, you can check out Dante's story. It's excellent. Dante knows the sport well, and I think without getting super jargony, was able to really, really just break down what this offense could look like for Temple, what might be asked of the offensive lineman, what might be asked of the quarterback, and what's possible. So, Dante, we know obviously there are, especially now in today's college football, Temple's roster is going to look different in March, and then it's going to look different again in August with more portal movement and recruiting movement and all sorts of stuff. So there's a lot, obviously, that will be done and shifted around between now and when Temple opens its 2025 season. But without giving away the whole story, give us a quick overview of what you wrote, and if you had to kind of just give a Temple fan an elevator speech of what they might be able to expect from if Tyler Walke does at Temple what he does at Montana State, what fans could expect.
Yeah, this is the hire you make if you want to fix a running game, I think would be my elevator pitch. This is an offense that is built to move the ball on the ground, and they want to get the ball to playmakers in space. That's the whole thing. Everything that they do on offense, you can draw to one of those two conclusions. It's either to set up a run for later in the game, or it's to get somebody who's fast the ball with not a lot of people around them. It's like truly that simple at its base level. And so I think that as somebody who has only loosely followed Temple football since I graduated, looking at the team's rushing statistics from last season, this hire makes a ton of sense. And so that would kind of just be my pitch, whether that comes from the running backs, whether that comes from the quarterback running the ball, and then on the outside, you're going to ask a lot of your receivers to block, but they also like to get some of those smaller guys the ball in space and let them use their speed. So it is truly just that simple. There's a lot of dress up to get there. And if you read the article, you can kind of go through what some of that is, but they want to run the football. Tyler Walke wants to get the ball to guys who can make plays. They're going to do whatever they have to do that. In 2023, they ran two quarterbacks on the field and ran RPOs off of that. So like that's how creative that they can get just to produce a running game that is solid.
So I think people a few years ago, when the transfer portal really opened up, when NIL became a thing, I think that I think the casual fan might have thought like, okay, the blue bloods will be able to really kind of keep everybody, and I don't think people realized how much rosters were going to be reinvented from the Power Four on down. Do you think it's just as easy, or do you think it gets a little harder now for new coordinators to come in and implement an offense? Do you think they're more inclined to say, okay, well, I might need to plan around whatever I have, or I'm going to be tried and true to like what I always do?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think it's more challenging. Especially when you're a new coordinator coming in to a new school, right? If you're a coordinator who's been at a school for a long time, you can kind of just recruit around what you want, right? So like if guys leave, it's okay, well, I'm just going to go to the portal and I'm going to find the same type of player, right? So if I have a system that requires a quarterback who is going to read out different concepts, right? A pro style quarterback, right? You can just go find another one. If you've been at a school for 7 years, you just kind of have that pipeline. You don't need to change your system. If you're coming in as a new coordinator for a new school, you have to work with what you have and who's staying. And then also you have to get into the portal and maybe get guys that fit your system better, but you might not be able to get those guys. You might not be able to get as many of those guys as you want to get. And so that can kind of lead to changes. So for me, I think it's harder. I think you have to be more adaptable as a play caller on offense and defense. And you've always had to be that way at the college level because you're always cycling through players anyway. But now I just think it's been sped up, right? Like you can't plan years ahead. It's like, okay, well, I have this group of freshmen coming in and they're going to be starters as juniors. And so in 2 years, maybe I need to make certain changes and I can kind of slow roll those out to accommodate those players. Now it's just every year I might have a different quarterback. And so what does that mean for the system? Can I recruit the same type of player? You can say that you're going to do that, but that's easier said than done. And so for me, I think it's harder. I do not envy you guys at all that you have to cover the sport in this capacity. I think it's awesome that the portal got opened up, but I'm also glad that NFL free agency is a little less chaotic than this. So
Mhm.
I do not envy anyone who has to coach around that either.
So not to get too into the weeds and give away too much of the article, but one thing that stuck out to me at the end is after breaking down all how run focused this offense is, and it's about getting playmakers space. You mentioned it can't just be some noodle arm quarterback that's running this offense. You mentioned that arm strength is an important part of this offense. So I wonder if you kind of just elaborate on that and what you think it needs, what type of quarterback you think you need to run this offense.
Yeah, I think the arm strength component is important because so much of the offense requires the quarterback to push the ball outside the numbers. And so I have access to heat map data for pretty much every pro and college quarterback in the entire country. I can't include that in the article, but I could describe it to you. It is incredibly red on the outside near the numbers, and the middle of the field is just like not really a place that historically the Tyler Walke offense cares about. And so when I think about quarterbacks who are going to push the ball outside the numbers, you got to have some zip on the ball to get it out there, right? Corners are going to be sitting on that. They're going to be ready for it. They're going to be coming downhill. So if you don't have enough zip on the ball to get it out there in a timely fashion, right, the corners are going to jump it. The other problem is that because this offense wants to maximize the space that teams are giving you, right? The core spread offense concept is we're going to stretch you horizontally with the passing game, and then we're going to run right up the middle in the gaps that creates, right? Like that's spread offense at its basic component. You can't take advantage of that space if the ball takes too long to get out there, because then guys are going to get tackled when they catch the ball. And so I don't know that you need arm strength from the perspective of Temple's going to come out and throw a bunch of 60-yard bombs this year. But I think if you're trying to maximize the space that your receivers have when they catch the ball to make guys miss, you need to have somebody who can get the ball out there quickly. It'll be a difference of 1 or 2 seconds, but it will make a difference.
And of that same vein, I mean, I think if you're a cynic, you say, well, Tyler Walker was only the offensive coordinator for 1 year, and he had Tommy Millott, who won the FCS equivalent of the Heisman in this offense. So I guess how hard is it, or is it possible to distinguish, was Tommy Millott able to have such a great season and get every award possible because of that offense, or is that offense successful because it had Tommy Millott?
I think that's a really good question. I would say I would probably give a little bit more credit to the offense just because I think you saw other quarterbacks kind of have success in it in previous seasons. And I think when you watch the tape, the main component that Malott brings to the table is his ability to run. And so for me, there's a lot of quarterbacks who can run. That's not a particularly difficult box to check. The passing game is incredibly simple. What I will give Malott credit for is I think you saw a player who they added a lot to his plate in year two from a passing game. If you watch the 2023 stuff, which I ended up doing for the article, the passing game's even simpler than the 2024 stuff. They actually gave him real progression reads off of play action passes, something that really wasn't in the offense that much in 2023. So I think Millant deserves some credit for improving as a player. He got better. That's a reason that they went away from the two quarterback system that they had. They just said, this guy's good enough. We're going to let him run a bit more of a traditional drop back offense. So he deserves some credit for that. But to me, like, every throw is just schemed space. Like guys are just open, they're running free. He does a lot with his legs. He's tasked with making different types of decisions. He has to make a lot of really quick decisions. Am I going to keep this? Am I going to give this? Is this RPO throw open? Okay, I'm going to keep it. Now I'm rolling to the outside. Do I now pitch the ball or do I run the ball or do I throw the ball downfield? So he has to make a lot of different decisions. So I think he deserves some credit. But the offensive system itself just creates so much space. And so if you can find an athlete who can capitalize on that, you're going to be productive. Now, to the degree that they were like the best offense in the FCS, I do think that Tommy deserves some credit for that. He maximized what they gave him, but they gave him a lot. And I think that Temple fans should be happy about that. I think that's a plus for this offense.
And then just for clarity's sake, because I can already hear people on our message boards, even though this is Walker's first year running the offense, there was enough similarities between previous offensive coordinators at Montana State, you think, with this system you saw in 2024 as well, right?
Yeah, I look, there are definitely differences, right? The reason I went back to watch the 2023 tape is because I found a bunch of coaching clinics on that, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna set my base for this offense, and then we'll kind of build. And so what I would tell you is the biggest difference that I saw between the 2 years of tape is that Walker was willing to put more on the quarterback's plate from a passing game perspective. And so they were a little bit more willing to not just spam RPOs all day. They called some like actual drop back passes for Tommy. And I think that was kind of the improvement that you saw from him. But like structurally, the offenses are the same. They are at a base level, and how you build off of that a lot of times will change between different coordinators. But he really took a lot of what I believe it was Taylor Housewright, I believe was the offensive coordinator before him, and just kind of changed it a bit to accommodate an improving quarterback. And so that kind of let them open the offense up a little bit more. They still were not a huge passing team, but they were really efficient.
Now, we talked earlier in the intro to the pod. I mentioned that there's a Big Ten recruit on campus, and it's out there now that Temple is recruiting Michigan quarterback or Michigan transfer quarterback Alex Orji in the transfer portal. He's on campus at Temple today. I don't profess to know who else is involved with his recruitment. Obviously, he was good enough to be recruited at Michigan. They're bringing in a big-time recruit for next year. I think Alex saw the writing on the wall, so he hit the portal. I've seen his highlights. I've seen some of his throws. It looks like Alex Orji he's certainly athletic, has a strong arm. I don't know that he really throws the ball with a lot of touch and anticipation, but let's say Temple gets him. I don't know that he's going to commit. We don't know if he's going to commit yet, but how would someone like an Alex Orji work in this offense if Temple were to get him?
Yeah, I think this is the perfect offense for him. If you're going to have success with a quarterback of his archetype, I think this is the type of offense that you want. I wrote this in the piece and I firmly believe it. I think if they are going to run what they ran at Montana State, which maybe they won't, maybe they'll get in and they realize that's not what they want to do with the players that they have. If they want to run the Montana State offense at Temple, you have to have a quarterback who can run. You just do. It's the entire core of the offense. Every single play, almost every play starts with some kind of zone read look, right? And whether that's a real zone read or they're just faking it to sell the threat of the quarterback run for later in the game can vary. But they are threatening defenses with that, and then they are playing off of how defenses respond to it, right? So in one of the coaching clinics that I watched, Housewright talked about like, hey, sometimes we go into a game and we tell the quarterback, like, no matter what, just keep the ball because you're faster than that guy. And I don't really care if he plays you, you're just gonna outrun him. Right. So that is the offense though. And then later in the game, they're like, okay, now they're dropping two guys in the box. I'm gonna throw an RPO over your head. Right. So that is, in my opinion, at least the biggest part of the offense. And when you look at the numbers, you have a quarterback go for more than 1,000 yards. Like and a lot of it is designed runs. Yes, he scrambles and he will do that type of stuff. And I think that's a whole other conversation that we can have. So Orji to me is a player with the athleticism to maximize those zone read looks. And then as Kyle brought up earlier, I think I have a lot of qualms with Orji's ability to read defenses and make throws that are challenging, I'm going to go with, but he certainly has the arm strength to push the ball outside the numbers and maximize the space that receivers have to make plays. So for me, if I'm looking for a scheme that fits this player, it's the one that Tyler Walke ran at Montana State. I think it's about as seamless as you could get.
Dante, does it fit guys that maybe like getting out of the pocket more and making, I don't, in this offense, I don't know if you would say they're out of structure plays because that's sort of what it calls for, but you know this. I mean, I'm not like, this isn't like super highbrow stuff. Some guys do get uncomfortable standing on their feet in the pocket, scanning the whole field, going through progressions, and they get in their own head. Some guys just like rolling to their left, rolling to the right. Some guys are better throwing across their body. Is that something that could fit him a little bit more because it calls for some of that stuff?
I think where it'll help Orgy, right, coming from a place like Michigan that runs a very pro style offense, right? So their quarterback's going to drop back. They're going to read two high, single high safety. They're going to go progression 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. This offense is, I'm telling you which half of the field to look at. You have two options. The ball needs to be out of your hands in 3 seconds, or you need to run, right? So for a quarterback like Alex Orji, I think that's a good place to start his development as a player trying to kind of find his footing as a passer, right? So a lot of this offense is just going to be scripted throws. It's going to be bubble screens. It's going to be, you're going to have a hitch and you're going to have a corner route. You're going to stare at the corner. If he covers the hitch, you throw the corner. If he drops back, you throw the hitch. That's it, right? It's pick a half of the field, pick a receiver, get rid of the football. And again, they want to run no huddle as well. So like it's get rid of the ball, get up to the line, we're going to run it again. Get up, like it's very simple. They're not going to ask him to do a lot of thinking, I don't think. And I think for a player who's trying to build confidence as a passer after Michigan kind of threw him to the wolves a bit and then kind of reeled that back and asked him to be a sub package player, I think that's a good place to start.
Kyle and Johnny, I want to bring you then on this too, because Dante, you were like throughout the year, you're editing more NFL stories and probably not watching a ton of Temple film. So let's say if Evan Simon and Forrest Brock are still on this roster in the spring, do you think those guys could play in this offense if it's currently constructed? I think Evan Simon's a little bit more mobile than people give him credit for. The line was really bad this year. I thought his numbers were pretty good considering the protection he had. Evan Simon was a pretty good runner. Kyle has pointed this out in previous podcasts. He was a very good mobile quarterback in high school. Forrest Brock is pretty mobile. Obviously, did not keep the starting job. Could these guys work at all in this offense or a slightly watered down version of it?
I think it can't be, if you want it to work, it can't be the offense that Dante describes where it's heavily focused on these guys being a constant threat to run, because I don't think that's what Evan or Forrest bring. I think it has to be like you mentioned, a watered down kind of offense like this where, oh, like maybe he does run occasionally every couple drives or like every couple plays in a drive, and you have to at least think about it. It can't be something that's a constant threat, something like, oh, like where you have to stack people in the box and you have to be ready for it. I mean, I don't know how effective an RPO style offense Simon or Brock would be because it wasn't used too much this year, the RPO, if at all, really. So I think that is also something that like you're asking someone like Simon or Forrest to kind of like, again, it's not too much thinking, but it's something different that they haven't played with before. So you have to kind of learn that as well. So I mean, again, it has to be an extremely watered down version of this for it to work. And I don't think it'll be the exact offense that Dante described if it's these two.
Right. I'll preface this by saying I watched 2 games of Montana State once I knew that Tyler Walke was going to be the offensive coordinator. Watched the last 2 games live. The reason Montana State's offense was successful to me, like an uneducated eye, was because there was the threat of Tommy Mellott on every single play. Every single play, there was a possibility of him just keeping it going up the middle. So, like, yeah, I'll echo what Johnny says, where if you're going to just try to copy and paste the offense from Montana State to Temple, can Evan Simon or Forrest Brock run that? No, that's probably more suited for like a Tyler Douglas.
Mhm.
However, every good offensive coordinator I've ever interacted with modifies their offense to the personnel they have. So like if Evan Simon, let's say Alex Orji comes, Evan Simon just truly beats him out. He's just truly the better quarterback and beats him out. Tyler Walker's not going to be like, well, guess what? Now we're going to shove this round peg into a square hole. Like they're going to modify the offense to the strengths of their players. So, do I think that Evan Simon can be successful in a Tyler Walker offense? Sure, it just won't look the same as what Tommy Mellott does now.
We ponder these questions now because it's all that we can do. But as we know, again, like I said earlier, ton of spring football left, ton of preseason camp football left in August. But do you think someone like Tyler Douglas is saying, I might have some new life here? Again, in the
Right.
2 practices that we were able to see last spring, he needed work as a thrower. They tried bringing him in for some sub packages with, well, the one was a complete disaster in the Yukon loss. Hate to, you know, just drill it down to that, but between his quarterback trainer Tony Raciopi being connected to Casey Keeler, and between him as currently constructed having the best legs and best mobility on the roster, do you think he's sticking around saying, "Oh, maybe I've got a shot in this offense"?
I think at the very least that's the reason he's stuck around for spring, right? Like I think it's easy to when you're the coaching staff that came in that recruited you leaves. I think it's easy to kind of jump ship. I mean, you see that happen with players everywhere, but especially at the quarterback position. But I think that the incoming scheme fits Tyler Douglas enough for him to be like, well, let me at least see like what's out there in the spring because yeah, Casey Keeler and Tyler Walker are going to come in and say, who do we have returning? Let's look at these stats. Yes, Evan Simon started 8, 9 games, whatever it is. But entering spring, it's essentially a blank slate. So I wouldn't surprise me if this is Tyler Douglas's best opportunity to see consistent playing time. Yeah.
Dante, to kind of tie this all together, obviously everybody borrows from everybody in football. There's no truly unique thing out there. So let's assume that the majority of the Temple fan base and the majority of reporters out there, like including us, until we knew that Tyler Walker was going to be the offensive coordinator, we were not watching Montana State on a weekly basis. If you had to talk to Temple fans and say, okay, if you didn't see the FCS championship game or you didn't go back and Google highlights of theirs, where might they have seen some of these concepts? And I know the answer is probably like, oh, you could find it in a lot of different places, some of these basic tenets, but like, are there a couple of offenses that jump out to you, might be like, hey, this thing that Dan Lemming did, another Casey Keeler guy, like did at Oregon or this place or that place? Or there are certain packages or certain offenses that jump out to you and say like, hey, it's kind of like this or it's kind of like that at the FBS level?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So one that sticks out with the quarterback run to me would be what Georgia Tech did with Haynes King this year. I think you get a lot of the read option and RPO looks that they would use. They don't use it as much as Montana State did, where like literally every Montana State play starts with some kind of zone read look. But they like to get Hayes King on the move a lot. They throw a lot of RPOs. The ball's out of his hands quickly. They kind of use him as he was injured for a certain portion of the year, and they pretty much just used him as a battering ram at quarterback. They just ran him into the defense like 12 times because he couldn't throw the football. So that would be kind of where I would look for the quarterback run. The passing game concepts, honestly, if you watch any spread offense in college football, you're going to find the stuff that Temple's going to be doing next year. There is nothing galaxy brain about what they're going to be doing in the passing game. And I don't mean that in like a derogatory way. Like it's just, it works. You have fast guys in space and you have a quarterback with a nice arm who can move a little bit and you just create a lot of easy yards for yourself. Where it gets more challenging is what's going to be interesting, I think, is going to be how that matches up with the level of competition increased, right? I think Montana State got a lot of, they had a lot of our guys are faster than your guys games where they just were like, look, you can't catch us. So we're just going to run around you. We don't really need to think about it too much. So I think that'll be the kind of small challenge that I think Tyler Walke and those guys will have to kind of look at. But I mean, look, you could watch an Oregon game where Dylan Gabriel throws four straight RPOs, and you might get that this year at Temple, depending on who's a quarterback. So there's a lot of spread concepts, but if you're looking for like good quarterback run stuff, I would say like Haynes King at Georgia Tech, super interesting. If this, I don't know off the top of my head when this is going to come out, but Riley Leonard's going to play in the college football playoff for Notre Dame. They use a lot of quarterback run stuff. It's not quite the same, but the way I would look at it if I was a fan is when you watch teams play, think about how defenses are changing to account for a mobile quarterback as opposed to what the specific quarterback runs themselves look like, if that makes sense, right? So when you're watching a game, think about, okay, the defense has to account for the quarterback here. How does that make the running back's life a little bit easier? How does that make the receivers' lives a little bit easier? That's kind of how I looked at it when I was watching Montana State. And again, I don't know how much they're going to be able to do that depending on the personnel that they have at Temple, but it's kind of the whole thing. So Riley Leonard, Hayes King, a lot of good mobile quarterbacks to watch.
How
Yeah.
many hours did you dedicate to watching Montana State? This is for my own personal information.
Like 4 hours.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
Impressive.
probably. Well, see, the problem was is I am used to watching NFL offenses at this point. So I do NFL draft work as well, but when I do NFL draft work, I'm watching individual players. And so my scheme work in college doesn't go past is this zone or is this man blocking? I don't like think about like passing concepts and different things like that. So I got a little bit too cocky. I started watching Montana State tape and I was like, this will be fine, like whatever. And I'm like, oh God, there's like a zone read every play. I can't tell if it's like actually a zone read. I'm trying to do like RPO versus play action, which is usually easy, but they do it all the time, so I can't tell. So I went to YouTube and I watched a bunch of Taylor Housewright coaching clinics, which I would recommend every Temple fan do. They're very interesting. And so that kind of gave me a good baseline. And then I went back to watch the tape and I was like, okay, it's different. So now I have to go back to 2023. And I watched a little bit of 2023. And then I ended up watching like three whole games of 2024 stuff. So about
What we're
four
saying is
hours.
when Tyler Walke watches this, we might have grad assistant Dante Collinelli at Temple coming in.
I don't know. I don't know about all that, but we'll see if I get a call.
Well, one of the other great points that you wrote about in the story was about, say it's about any offense, but what it demands of the offensive lineman too. Could you talk a little bit about that? Again, any coaching staff will be coming in, assessing the linemen that they have. It's been a source of struggles for Temple, and we know how hard it is to get really good linemen in the portal now. I mean, if quarterbacks are going for six figures, so are tackles, so are God, probably interior linemen. Now revenue share is coming into play. So it's hard to get really good difference making offensive linemen. What are the challenges or maybe some of the advantages potentially of running an offense like this for a program like Temple that hasn't been able to piece together a really good cohesive offensive line for whatever reason, be it injuries, coaching, whatever the case may be?
Yeah, I think if you're looking at this offense in a kind of like hierarchy, right? It's the quarterback run was like the number one thing. The threat of that kind of set everything up. The number two biggest advantage that I felt like Montana State had is they were just beating the hell out of people up front. Like they were just clearing holes. Guys were getting pancaked every play. So I think when you think about trying to bring this offense up a level, I think some of the advantages it provides you is in pass protection as the offense is currently constructed, those guys don't need to pass protect that long. The ball comes out quickly. The decisions are very snappy. On an RPO, it's very easy. If the linebacker steps up, you throw it over his head. It takes 2 seconds. The ball's out. So it's kind of hard to get a sack on a play like that. You know that usually is on the quarterback, not the line, because the quarterback will hold the ball too long. So that's kind of the advantage. The one kind of interesting thing that I think they might have to consider is you have a line that likes to run a lot of outside zone. And typically, in outside zone, you want more athletic offensive linemen. You're not so much worried about their mass and their power and different things like that. So, trying to find a balance between guys who are athletic enough to execute that, but then will also be able to create the overwhelming advantage that they had at Montana State from a physicality perspective might be a bit of a challenge. The finding those type of archetypes are difficult. It's not easy, so I think you're going to have to make some concessions. What I will say is that the type of quarterback might dictate a little bit more what type of offensive line you want. If you're trying to adapt this offense for a player like Evan Simon, you might want to incorporate longer reads and more progression-based reads into the offense because he's just has more experience. He's a better thrower of the football. If you're building this offense for Alex Orji, well, then yeah, you want guys up front who are just going to run people over, and you're not too worried about how long they hold up in pass pro because I've got a great athlete back there who I'm asking to just get the ball out of his hands as quickly as humanly possible. So I think that once they figure that out, it'll be easier to figure out what they want up front. But generally speaking, I think that you're going to want to prioritize some athleticism over power. Just because I think you'll get the most out of those outside zone concepts, those plays where they try to get guys out on the perimeter, out in the space. And the other thing you have to consider, this is a no huddle offense, at least as currently constructed. Conditioning matters. So, like, do you want bigger, heavier, more powerful linemen who just like are going to be slower to get to the line of scrimmage? They are not going to be at their best in the fourth quarter as opposed to somebody who's a little bit lighter on his feet and doesn't have as much weight to lug around. So those are the kind of conversations that I think they're going to have in the O-line room. But we'll see. You guys would know more about what types of offensive linemen they currently have and where gaps need to be filled.
Another thing that I think of too, and again, I didn't watch a ton of them. Does an FCS offensive line in this offense, like Montana State, was he maybe rotating a couple guys in, or was he still kind of like looking at like as long as I have my same five guys out there and they can all play every snap, I'm good because they're that well conditioned? Or did you see them rotating a couple guys in and saying like, hey, I am confident bringing in this guy who's like a can swing out to tackle or guard. Did you see him playing more than five guys a game on the offensive line, or is that something that you noticed?
So I'll be honest, I didn't watch for that specifically, so I could be wrong, but off the top of my head, it was not something that I noticed. What I did notice was this was a group that lost a ton of starters, I believe, in 2023 to 2024, and they were very, very confident with the group that they had. I read a few stories about, they felt like going into the season that they were going to dominate on the ground, and that's what you saw on tape. And so I think what I would take away from that is I don't know how much, say Tyler Walke had in the development of the offensive lineman or how much the scheme helped them, but this seems like a guy who has worked around creating a really cohesive unit, and I think Temple could benefit from that, whether that was him or the offensive line coach who worked at Montana State. I can't really say, but this is somebody who has coached offense with lines that were really together. And so he should be able to take something away from that because when you run a zone offense, your guys have to be on the same page because it's very easy to give up a gap. I would say it's more important than physical talent is everyone just being on the same page. You can actually get a lot done.
Yeah.
Well, Dante, spoiler, good segue. Al Johnson, the offensive line coach,
Yes.
is also coming to Temple.
There we
Yes.
go.
So there you go.
Yeah. Dante, before we move on here, tell people, I mean, obviously Kyle and I know you really well. Johnny's getting to know you today. For people who are listening to you for the first time, tell us or tell them about what it's like working with the 33rd team, how you obviously you were an editor at the Temple News. Tell people how you got into this and became this sicko who was just obsessed with. There are some young people who say like, I want to be a scout. I love football. I want to write about this. You took that love of it, but really ran with it. And now you have a really cool job in the industry. I know you play a little bit of high school football, you were on the sport, but tell people how you got into this and what it's like working at the 33rd team now for people who don't know as much about it.
At a very base level, I loved football ever since I can remember. It was just always I don't know, I just always gravitated towards it. And I realized very quickly that I did not have the facilities to be a football player. And so my brain kind of pivoted to okay, how do I work around this? How do I do what I love and have a career? And so I wanted to do play-by-play, right? Because that was as close as I could get. But when I got to Temple's campus and I started writing for the Temple News, I just quickly fell in love with that medium. I liked writing. I thought it was a really good skill, and I really took to it. And I think the great thing about football is that I can spend roughly 4 hours watching Montana State film, and I'm probably like 5% of an expert on that offense. Like I relatively speaking, know nothing. And I think that that's really cool. There's just always something more that you can glean. There's always a level deeper that you can go. And so for me, I just can't think of any other job in the world that's as cool as I just sit down and I watch football. That's why I wanted to be a scout. Obviously, that did not work out. I decided to take a little bit more of a journalism spin to it. And so I work as the deputy editor at the 33rd team. We have gone through many iterations of a business model since I've been there. It is very, very different from when I started. When I started, it was we're going to call up Bill Parcells and he's going to write a column for us. And so you're going to be his ghostwriter and you're going to edit that. And that part of the process was really, really rewarding and it was very, very cool. Um, it was not a sustainable media model. And so we have kind of pivoted to, hey, we have those experts and they help us and they work behind the scenes and they do a lot of really, really great stuff. And we still have that in our bag if we want it, but we have a really, really good group of writers. And so I've been able to almost pivot away from like football analysis. I do a lot of it because I love it. It's not actually my job anymore, which has been really interesting. A lot of my job is like helping other people do football analysis and making sure that, we cover the things we're supposed to be covering. Thinking about content plans and schedules and different things like that. So it's been a really interesting journey, but at the end of the day, it was really just for me. I loved football. I would have done anything to work in and around the game, whatever it took. And so when I was in college and when I spent a lot of time in the Temple newsroom watching film, I don't do that technically as my job right now, but it helps me do my job a ton. I can have really good conversations with people who are in the industry who know more football than I will ever know. And I can help, kind of put that into our content. So when our content goes out, it's been screened by somebody who has a rudimentary knowledge of things like coverage schemes and scouting and stuff like that. So it's been really rewarding. I am very, very excited about some of the cool stuff that we'll have rolling out. So I feel like I've dabbled in like every possible bucket that I could for covering football, and I'm only 25. So it's been pretty cool.
I mean, you mentioned Bill Parcells. Like, can you tell us about some of the other people you've edited? Because I know, like you said at first, it was like you guys were bringing in people. What, like Joe Banner was involved, right, and some other
Mhm.
former executives.
Yeah, so Bill Parcells, I edited a lot of Bill Polian for the first couple of years. He had a ghostwriter, Vic Carucci,
Hmm.
as well. So I worked with those guys. Mike Martz, Dave Wannstedt, Rick Spielman, Mike Tannenbaum, who's obviously our founder. A lot of other guys. We had Mike Vick was around for a bit. We had Samari Roll. Man, I'm blanking. We had a just a huge we had like 40 guys in year one. It was like
Hmm.
a crazy, crazy roster. A really, really rewarding experience. Rondé Barber
Hmm.
did content for us for a good amount of time. It was really cool. It was just like, coming out of college and like one of your first assignments is like, yeah, Hall of Fame GM is gonna file and you gotta dress up his stuff and make it look as good as humanly possible. Like that, was a challenge and it was, a lot to handle, but it just incredibly, incredibly rewarding.
What's the editing process like? Do you ever get like where a lot of those guys like, yeah, I'm cool, just dress it up as you need to, or did you ever get anybody? You don't have to get too far in the weeds in this. Did you ever get anybody saying to you like, "Hey, man, don't touch my stuff. Just leave it as it is."
Yeah, I have to be very careful about how I
Yeah,
answer this question. I would say it varied from person to person.
fair enough. Yeah.
Some people I had complete creative control. Other people I had, the bumpers that they put up for bowling, right? It was more
Mhm.
of, hey, you stay in the lane, don't veer outside of the lane, and we'll be okay. I would say generally though, like as far as most people were very agreeable
Mhm.
to a almost surprising degree. And so I think that that was really cool. Some people would have their own ghostwriters. Sometimes it would be somebody from my staff who I oversaw who would help with the ghostwriting. So it was really a person to person thing, which also made it really challenging in so that you would handle one person very differently than the other. So the editing process would change like every day per person, sometimes per article. And so you're also working with people who are not media members. And so sometimes you kind of have to steer them in the correct direction, which was challenging, but also very cool.
Dante, how did we get that picture? Did you send us that picture of you when you were like younger and you have the glasses and long hair and you're in your one of your Council Rock football uniforms? Can we use that to promote the pod? I can't remember if you shared that picture or if that was a Kyle Stalk job.
Wasn't me.
I highly doubt I sent it to you guys because I definitely don't have it anywhere, which means somebody definitely found it. Yeah, I think
Kyle's playing dumb. Kyle
No,
playing.
I legitimately don't think it was me. I'm gonna say Carolina Sam.
I think it was Lawrence,
Yeah.
John, the former editor-in-chief at the Temple News when
Aren't you
I was
kidding it?
there.
And Politico. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, he's a Politico now. It might have been him. I think I was in seventh grade when that was taken. I think I was like 13 or 14.
It's amazing. Maybe we'll
Yeah.
maybe we'll use that. Maybe you'll see that on the front page of OwlScoop tomorrow as we promote the pod. So, but good stuff, Dante. Appreciate it. Let's get into some other football news and notes here about the Temple program. So if you're an OwlScoop subscriber, you know that we've been breaking most of the news about Casey Keeler's staff and keeping you updated there. Kyle broke the news on the new tight ends coach. So if you go to the thread on our football message board, you can see the complete list of what Casey Keeler's on the field staff looks like now. Kyle also broke the news of Keeler adding former Michigan star Roy Roundtree, who's joining his staff to be Temple's new wide receivers coach. He was the wide receivers coach at Miami of Ohio last season. On the recruiting front, big news for Temple there. Jet White, the four-star cornerback from Miami's Edison High School, announced his verbal commitment to Temple on Wednesday. So that's a big get. At least in terms of rankings, again, we always have to see how these things play out. We'll talk about that in the mailbag. But on the surface, a big get for Casey Keeler and his staff. Ryan Mack from our staff talked to him this morning, so look out for that story. Might be out by the time you guys listen to this podcast. Had some big offers early in his recruitment from programs like Ohio State, Alabama, and Florida State. He
Was a
initially,
USC commit for a
yeah,
while.
former USC commit early on, then Maryland. So Henry Baker, Casey Keeler's first hire, right? He was Casey's first hire, right? Henry Baker.
Well, if you don't count Clayton Barnes, the
Yeah,
general
Clayton
manager.
Barnes,
But
general
on
manager.
field, I feel like he was one of, if not.
So Henry Baker is going to be the cornerbacks coach at Temple. He was the common thread here in his recruitment. He's been key in his recruitment. He helped commit him to Maryland previously. Ryan also wrote about Willie Love, the Monmouth linebacker transfer, who's also committed to Temple. He's an interesting story in that he had some really big offers when he was at Camden's Eastside High School. Keeler bringing in Chris Rattano was Love's position coach at Monmouth as his outside linebackers coach at Temple, certainly helped there. So why did Willie Love end up at the FCS level and not at a program like Rutgers, where a lot of people thought he would go? Ryan got into that with Willie Love, so you can read that in his story. Again, of course, another big piece of recruiting news that we talked about a couple times earlier, again, is that Michigan transfer Alex Orji is in for a visit this week. He's on campus right now as we're recording this, so something to keep an eye on.
Sorry, beyond Orgy, we're the only outlet that has any other visitors. I mean, I think we have
Yep.
7, 8, 9 confirmed for this week, and
Yeah.
it's only us. So subscribe
Yes.
to OwlScoop.com.
Yes, definitely a great time to subscribe. You can go to our football message board and get a very up-to-date list of guys who are either on campus right now or visiting soon. Some other recruiting news that went down right around Christmas. Xavier Bryant and Devontae Grant, a pair of cornerbacks from Orlando's Evans High School, committed to Temple during their official visit before Christmas. Talked to Xavier Bryant for a story that came out on Christmas Eve, so you can go back, check that out. Another guy that they picked up in terms of verbal commitment that might project well for them as a potential starter is Hampton transfer Omar Ibrahim, a cornerback, another North Jersey guy. I talked to him, wrote about him a couple days after Christmas. Played 2 seasons at the FCS level at Hampton. Could potentially be in a position to come in and start, considering they've lost all but two scholarship corners, either to graduation or to the portal. We know now that
Well,
Jamel
sorry,
Johnson.
it's 3 now. because Ben Osweke is back, which we also
Oh,
put
you're
on
right.
today
Right.
because of
Absolutely. Yeah,
the
because of the
Diego
recent one.
Pavia lawsuit.
Yeah. So Jamel Johnson, who was probably their best cover corner last year, is headed to NC State to play for former Temple defensive coordinator DJ Elliott down there. So, a guy like Ibrahim could come in as a guy who started 23 games during his Hampton career, played 824 college snaps down there. He told me he's got good size, 6'1", 185. I'll play a little clip here. We talked for a good while. He was really, really cool kid to talk to. This is a clip of Omar Ibrahim talking about wanting a single digit, but he seemed very in tune with what that would entail, why he thinks he can start, that it's going to be earned, but some actual substance to the conversation here. So here's a part of our conversation that we'll play for you here, and then we'll get into some men's basketball and the ugliness of the ECU loss on the other side here. I know you talked a lot about Coach Baker. What did they tell you about just like the scheme that they're planning on running and how they plan to use you?
I don't really know the exact scheme we're running. We just talked about, I would say we talked about a good bit of just, everything, like every coverage you could think of running on a defense. Just talking with them, we ain't really sat down yet to see where they wanted to use me exactly. But I know that, they have good trust in me, and then they have, they trust me a lot, and they think highly of me to where they could bring me in, and they want me to because even within 2 years, I have 824 snaps. So I think they think very highly of me, and as well as they want me to just come in and just not be that guy, but just, help get the young guys acclimated to college football, Because it's one thing being a college football player, and there's another thing like playing in a game. Because, when you get in the game, it's a whole different, story.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they have good trust in me, and they trust me a lot to go out there and play, and even just helping with some of the younger guys and helping them get acclimated to playing college ball.
I'm sure, like any coach, they'll tell you, hey, you got to come in, earn your starting position. But I'd have to think you're in a pretty good position to start because every year programs are gaining guys and losing guys to the portal. Was that kind of one of their pitches to you and saying, like, hey, man, you could really, given what the ins and outs that we've had in the secondary, you're in a real good position to start here. Did they talk to you about that, about how they could look to you to come in and just really play critical football right away?
I would say somewhat, didn't say the whole thing, but then, and even in my mind mainly, it was just like for all like, and nothing against the staff, but for all that they could say, I'm going to start here, but at the end of the day, I know I got to go in there and earn it, especially with the, with Temple having the single digit system that they have. Like, I'm just the type of guy to go in there and just be like, like, I'm going to get a single digit and I'm going to start. And that's just the mindset I come with. And once I get to working out and get to pushing myself, like, it's hard for me to stop. Yeah. And so, I even told him straight up, I'm like, hey, like, I'm going to get a single digit, I'm going to start. And that's just the mindset and attitude I bring to, coaches, et cetera.
Were you aware of that single digit tradition even before they recruited you?
No, I was not. And so just seeing that and them informing me and explaining it to me more, I like the idea of what they have for single digits that is not given as earned. And so, I'm the type of guy that, I've worked for everything in my life, especially football. Like, I've worked for getting scholarships. I've worked on going to school for free. And so with that single digit, that's another thing I would say that I really want to work for. Not only is the league like the main goal, but I feel like the single digit is a very big thing on me trying to earn. And so, me going into winter workouts and stuff like that, and even going to spring ball, it's just with the mindset of that I got to show out and that I got to, be myself, and as well as, be a great team player, and as well as, set an example for everybody.
All right. So as always, we'll have a ton more football news for you in the coming weeks. We'll talk more about it in the mailbag. Let's talk a little bit about this men's basketball team. Dante, how familiar are you with the Adam Fisher era? Have you been following along?
I watched the tournament last year. Does that count?
Yeah, that was a good stretch of basketball where they damn near got to the NCAA tournament not long after a 10-game losing streak. So after beating Wichita State in the conference opener, an ugly loss Wednesday night at ECU, a game that Temple could have and should have won. Instead, they dropped the game 80-79. No field goals for the last 2 minutes, 49 seconds down the stretch, and just turnovers, getting out rebounded. They lose despite shooting 56% from the floor from three and 22 of 24 from the foul line, but really got out rebounded again. 8 second half turnovers, outscored in the paint badly, 44 to 22 and 32 to 12 in the paint in the second half. Lingrier the third was back again since we last recorded. Missed the Wichita State game due to personal reasons. Was back in the lineup last night. Came off the bench, 3 rebounds in 5 first half minutes. Did not play in the second half. Yeah, for whatever it's worth, a blown chance to gain some momentum and maybe be 3-0 in conference play heading into next Thursday's whiteout game against a ranked Memphis team. Now, I don't know. Let's say they beat ECU and then they win at Rice this weekend. Sure, they could be 3-0 going to the Memphis game, and then they could lose by 20 to Memphis, and then where does that lead them? But we've talked about this so many times. This fan base goes game to game. It's like a pro sports fan base, and now I think you'll see a dip in fandom and excitement. But I know a lot of this is obvious, but again, an 80-79 loss at ECU. Jordan Riley had a relatively quiet game. The Temple transferred. Johnny, Kyle, what did you think of this loss? Other than it's a bad one. Again, Dante brought up, hey, the American Athletic Conference tournament last year, they weathered a 10-game losing streak and still almost got to the tournament. So much of their season is going to come down to the conference tournament, but
Right.
certainly finer moments.
In that hypothetical you just laid out, what if they went 3-0 and then lost by 20 points to Memphis? Where would that leave them? You know where it would leave them? In the exact same place it would be if they beat Memphis by 30 points.
Mhm.
They need to win the conference tournament to have a chance at the tournament.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no scenario where they get an at-large bid,
Mhm.
period. So,
Yeah.
like, games like yesterday are probably disheartening if you're a Temple fan because, look, you saw them lose to a team that, honestly, I think ECU is probably going to be a middle to bottom of the conference team. I don't think they're very good. So, like, to see things like that and to see you get, once again, just out-muscle on offensive rebounding and stuff like that, obviously it's disheartening, but it doesn't change the landscape of Temple's resume or anything like that. But yeah, a little bit disheartening, especially, look, I mean, it doesn't seem like Jordan Riley like salted the earth on his way out and like flipped people off and left. Like it seems like Adam Fisher's staff like still respect him. They liked what he did last year. But like if you're a guy like Shane Dezzoni, who's on at Stanford, who was on this team and played with them, and that guy chose to leave you, like of course you're going to get up a little bit for a
Yeah.
game against a game like that. So I'm sure it leaves a sour taste in their mouth. It was also just kind of a strange game. Like Steve Settle didn't take a shot until the second half. At halftime, it was Steve Settle, Aiden Tobiasen, and Babatunde Dorodola. Three of their stars had combined for one shot attempt. And like I understand Jamal Mashburn Jr. is a very ball dominant guard, and Quante Berry's been a lot more aggressive with the ball with shooting. So like I understand those shots are kind of they're only going to come when they come, but that's wild to me. That three starters had one field goal attempt in the first half, and like especially a guy like Steve Settle, who should probably be your second or third leading scorer every single game. So a strange game is how I would describe it.
While watching it and like as the game was going on, I mean, it's obvious that people would get frustrated because you have the high hopes, you want them to keep winning, and if you want them to build a resume, but like Kyle said, it's win the conference tournament or bust at this point for them. I mean, there was never going to be an at-large bid. I think while watching the game, like Kyle and like John, I was very confused. I mean, it just had like a weird vibe throughout the whole game, and when it comes and then especially the ending too with first it's Temple's ball when it goes out of bounds on the Zion missed layup, and then they take forever to look at the review to get the clock right to make sure they get the call right, and then I mean it just and the turnover by Dezzoni on the inbound pass, which again the inbound plays continue to hurt them. That killed them in the
Yeah.
LaSalle game, and it once again comes back to bite them in the ECU game. It's just they haven't been able to really figure that out, and the rebounding too. We've talked about that for it feels like we talk about it every podcast where it's the offensive rebounds every time they lost that 11-5 this time. It feels like it's the same thing we're saying over and over again when it comes to a loss, and that part is frustrating if you're a fan when you keep saying the same things over and over again. But I don't think this changed the landscape at all. I mean, they continue to lose on the road as well. They still play well at home, but when it seems like when they're on the road, they just maybe it's routine, maybe it's I don't know what it is, but yeah, overall frustrating loss for them.
Yeah, we'll talk more men's hoops in the mailbag. Let's talk about this women's basketball team. As I said at the outset of the show, they beat Florida Atlantic in overtime. Kaylah Turner starting to emerge. Scored 7 of her 25 points in overtime. Amaya Oliver was out with the flu. Diane Richardson told me it's been going through the team since the holidays. So they missed her on the glass. They won despite getting out rebounded 64-38. So a lot of missed shots to go around in an overtime game. But
Did Maya Oliver give Notre Dame the flu? People are saying that.
yeah,
Just saying it's running through their locker room.
It's in the
I didn't
room,
even
though.
know it was running through the Notre
They're
Dame
wrong.
locker room.
Al's just muscling through. He's rubbing vapor rub on people's chest.
If so, it's a bigger story. We should go.
Not to crap on them. I found it funny this morning. The Inquirer ran like a pretty basic, like a clickbaity, like how to watch the Penn State Notre Dame game and just like that stuff. Johnny, not to crap on you, but they then included a photo of Golden catching a touchdown against Notre Dame by coincidence. They didn't even mention Al Golden's the defensive coordinator for Notre Dame. They just included by like Penn State Notre Dame in the archives, and they had a photo of Al Golden.
Is it the one where he's in the end?
It's
Like,
him catching the
yeah.
touchdown against Notre Dame. Yeah.
So Al has that.
Uh-huh.
When he was Temple's head coach, he lived somewhere on the main line. I think he lived in like Wayne or Radnor. He had that not that he told me he had that picture framed like somewhere in his living room or his
I
family.
would too if I was him.
I
I
would
got a
too,
touchdown
yeah.
against Notre Dame.
Yeah. Do you remember the Al Golden workout video that people
Oh, do
yeah.
I?
Yeah, Penn State.
It's literally
Yeah.
just him with like a neck, like he's basically wearing like the neck, like the Texas like neck collar as linebacker while working out and just doing.
Mhm.
He's insane. I love that man.
Not to we will get back to women's poops, I promise you. But now that we brought it up, Dante, not that we brought you on to talk Notre Dame football, but who do you like in that game, and what do you think of the job that Marcus Freeman's done, that Al Golden's done with that defense, if you've watched them?
Yeah, I have a personal rule of thumb that I never trust James Franklin in a big game, so I like Notre Dame.
Smart.
I think defensively, like Notre Dame is just sound, man. Like
Mhm.
they're very like do their job. They're not the flashiest defense in the world, but they are where they're supposed to be, and like that's like 75% of defense. At the end of the day, if you make a lot of offenses work for it, especially at the college
Mhm.
level, they tend to screw up. And so Notre Dame does that a lot. They've got a lot of really good players, and I'm watching for the draft this year. I love Xavier Watts, the safety. That dude is awesome. Benjamin Morrison's hurt, but he's a really good corner for them. The linebacker Jack Kaiser is really, he's a tough downhill guy. I'm sure Al Golden loves him. So they're just really well coached. I mean, I think Al's done a great job there, man. He really has. Him and Marcus are like the perfect blend, at least in my mind, of like modern defense and throwback defense, where like they have the toughness of the defenses that I think, Al probably grew up with, and they have that mentality about them, but they play modern schemes and modern pressures and modern coverages, and they're not just like this, we're just going to come downhill and we don't have any guys who can run or anything like that. So it's a really cool combination. Watching their offense makes me sad, I'm going to go with, but the defensively, great watch. Love it.
Yeah, I kind of all the games this year, I think I've watched the most against Army, and I was impressed. Again, I know that like the typical college football fan might say, okay, well, it's been a nice little run, guys, at West Point, and you're going to lose to Notre Dame because they should be bigger, faster, and stronger, and they have NIL, blah blah blah. But like, I still was impressed with what Notre Dame did to defend Army this year in that game, because it was a very good Army team, and I know they kind of stumbled to finish a little bit, but like I don't know, I was really impressed with them in that game. I know we're not talking about Army and as we get into the college football playoff, but thought they've been really good defensively this year. So again, back to women's hoops. Temple is now 3-1 in conference play now. They have their wins over UAB and ECU. They lost at USF back on Saturday since we last recorded. So the Bulls are almost, I feel like, perennially picked as the team to win the league. So Temple will host Tulsa Saturday. Jason Nieves will be at the game for us. He's been doing a great job when the women's beat for us. We'll have coverage of that game. We'll have Jay on next week to talk a little bit more women's hoops with Johnny. Johnny, any thoughts on that game? I knew you were kind of more locked in on the men's game, but 3-1 with the loss to USF. I know that they still have their shortcomings. They could rebound better. They could, or maybe let me ask you this: like there have been games where they have lacked. People are like, okay, we're gonna just smother a TR East. Is Kaylah Turner emerging as like someone they can trust? I mean, she did it last night, but like somewhat like, are you believing in her more and saying like, hey, there's a reason why she was the SWAC freshman of the year last year?
No, I think she's definitely coming along. I mean, she's Ray Dunn, obviously the voice for women's basketball. I mean, I've talked to him about someone that might be able to help step up with after some of the transfers that they had, and it can't just be TR East and Tariana Gary. And Kayla Turner was one of the ones that he mentioned that like watching her in the practices he got to watch before the season and in the practices during the season, she's someone that has really come along, and it took her a little bit to get comfortable, but now in this offense, she feels a lot more comfortable. She's getting the playing time, and I think she's someone that can like kind of really fill in that role to kind of take the pressure off TR East because again, she's one of the top players in the conference, but she can't do it all. And that, I mean, the scheme and the scout is going to tell you that TR East is the one to guard. But if you have someone like Kayla Turner that can come off the bench, that completely changes the way that teams have to scout, play defense when the both of them are on the floor, or if TR East is on the bench, now you have to shift your focus to Kayla. So I think she's someone that could really put Temple into another gear if she continues to play the way that she's playing.
So again, we'll have more women's hoops coverage next week as the season goes on. Let's jump into the mailbag here before we get into the mailbag, as he does each episode. Mike Greenspan of Greenspan and Greenspan Injury Lawyers. Again, he's there for you if you need him as an injury lawyer, but he wants to keep you safe on the roads. Talks this week about being a good defensive driver, about how good defense is, how important defense is. So I need to pay tribute to Mike here. We'll put the video of this out there on our social media channels. Mike is in a suit and tie, and he is in New York State where snowflakes are coming down around him. It's commitment to his craft. So
No days off.
no days off from Mike Greenspan. So here's Mike's tip for the week, and then we will get into the mailbag.
Hey, Temple fans. We all know that defense wins championships. Well, that is also true for driving in the snow. And yes, it's snowing. So why is defense important to you? Well, you know how to drive, but there are a lot of people who seem to forget how to drive when they're out on the roadway, especially in the snow. They figure, hey, I'm in an SUV. I can still go 70 on the turnpike, even though it's snowing and icy. So what do you need to do? When you're driving in weather like this, expect everyone else to be very aggressive. You keep a lot of space between you and the vehicle to your front. Expect that someone is going to skid, and make sure you are concentrating on the road with both hands on the wheel. Never is that more important in driving in snowy weather. So stay warm, stay safe, keep your eyes open for it, and of course, go Owls.
All right, first mailbag question from Twitter. Andrew Forgotch from Twitter asking us, why does it feel like, and this is pertaining to football, why does it feel like they're keeping the coaches a secret? Is a contract scenario, social media policy, or something else? For context, I follow West Virginia on X. I used to live there, and it feels like they're announcing a new assistant coach regularly. Why not build the hype?
I hear you. And like teams do that. I think it's really just kind of up to the discretion of Casey Keeler. I think they are just going to announce the staff all at once. Here is the staff. Is that the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? I mean, I don't think it really matters. I'm also an instant gratification guy where I would prefer to just boom, 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 get these as they come out. But like in the grand scheme of things, it's kind of just that's what they chose to do, and it won't have any impact one way or the other because it's not like these guys are now recruiting. Like they are functioning in their roles.
And in Tyler Walker's case, I'm sure that he probably had conversations with him saying, hey, can we keep this
Yes.
under wraps until you are doing your current job, until you do your next job? And he didn't want any distractions for his guys heading into the FCS national championship game. The next question here from our message board from the screen named Sunny Al, a 4-part question. How much of an impact, number one, how much of an impact do you see Jet White having overall? Temple has had 4 stars before, like Karamo Diabate, who never really made a splash.
Karamo played. Like Karamo was a defensive tackle, but I think people a lot of times just think like defensive tackle 4-star is gonna be Aaron Donald, and like no, he was a B gap defensive tackle, and but like yeah, the other one's not great.
You were talking about this. I had it in my mind. We talked about this before we started recording. I had it in my mind that Darryl Robinson was a 4-star. I guess he wasn't. Eric Reynolds, who obviously had some off-field issues, I thought he was a 4-star, but when he committed to BC, but Kyle pointed out that he was a 3-star. Yeah, we talked about TJ Simmons, who
TJ Simmons
was the UCLA commit.
Yeah, who came down to when he decommitted, came down to him. He had like a knee injury his senior year, missed most of his senior year. Came down to Temple or Marshall. I remember quote unquote Marshall journalists tweeting at TJ Simmons reasons why he should come to Marshall. he was a guy that came in with three. They had brought three running backs in that class. They brought him, Rockwell Armstead, and
Jagger Gardner.
Jared Gardner, who like Armstead was a future pro. He was better than TJ Simmons. So like, yeah, that kid left early. So
Yeah.
the only cat. So like, if you go down the list, like Kareem Ali, Legacy, didn't want to do much. Transferred to Western Michigan. Cromer, we talked about. Aaron Ruff was a big one. Never really saw the field. I think he started that one game against like Army where they had no offensive linemen, and
Yeah.
Dave Patno got angry after the game. To get to a little bit of fairness, you can basically count Harrison Hand because Harrison Hand came to Temple as a transfer, but he would have come to Temple as a freshman
Had Fran Brown.
if Fran Brown hadn't gone down to Baylor with Rule. And he ended up being, like an all-conference level guy that ends up playing in the pros for a couple of years. So to be determined. I think it's usually a reason like look, let's be honest here. Temple didn't just get Jet White over USC and Alabama. Like Jet White is available because other spots have filled up.
Yep.
Like other like staffs have changed around. Like there's a reason these guys are usually available and they fall to Temple towards the end. So like that kind of maybe is an indicator. But like from everything you kind of read is Jet White didn't just choose Temple over community college. Like he had other offers at this point. Other schools still wanted him at this point. They just weren't necessarily to that level. So it's to be determined. I think it's a position where there's the opportunity for him to come in and play right away.
Yeah, absolutely. We just mentioned before. Now they have 3 scholarship corners with Beneswege coming back. Question number 2, with Kevin Terry withdrawing from the portal, he is, of course, a tackle, mostly left tackle. I'm curious to know how much you've heard about other players potentially withdrawing and rejoining the team.
I think the one that maybe you want to pay some attention to is potentially Terez Worthy. I would bet it doesn't happen. But everybody else that's in the portal, I would expect to stay in the portal. That being said, I'm going to be honest, Kevin Terry was a surprise to me. I thought he was going to go to Illinois. So
Yeah.
good for them
Yeah.
for getting him back in the fold.
Yeah. What letter grade would you give Casey Keeler based on his very short time at Temple so far?
Incomplete.
Yeah.
It is way too early. Literally nothing has happened. It's just been recruiting and staff. I think we get a question about this. I like the staff so far, but yeah, incomplete.
Question number 4, are the OwlScoop hats from the live show for sale?
Great hat. Cuts off my blood circulation to my brain.
I think we're big noggins people. Like I have a big noggin. Johnny, I'm assuming you have a big noggin.
I do, yes.
Yeah, so like
Me too, yeah.
my hat is for sale. Game worn.
Game worn hat.
Dante, did we ever give you an OwlScoop hat?
No, I never got one.
I'll send it to you in the mail. Amelia.
John has like a closet of like 40 of these somewhere.
I would
was trying to give him
I
away.
would actually wear it if you sent it to me. So
I will send you one. I will.
People will assume it's Rice. They're like, wow, Rice has a new media outlet.
Yeah. OwlScoop.com.
I was really hoping Rice played Temple this year so I could go and see the Owl Bowl, or at least one of them.
It was in the EJ Warner Bowl, but then EJ Warner's not there anymore, and Rice isn't playing with him.
Do we know where EJ's going yet?
No, but I also didn't know he was going to Rice until he announced he was going to Rice. So the Warner family, known for their tight lips.
No. Yeah. Has Kurt compared EJ to Dylan Gabriel again this week, or did he sort of mention him in the same breath? We should say, right? Which was
Yeah.
again, love EJ. Never met Kurt, Hall of Fame quarterback. Who am I to say? 4-parter there from Sunny Al. Appreciate it, Dante. We'll send you a hat in the mail. Another question here, another mailbag question from the message board from the screen name Mike TB31. Will Keeler have to make a large adjustment with recruiting FCS versus FBS, and will he be able to navigate the NIL waters effectively and efficiently? Has he complained to the higher ups yet that their NIL efforts are pathetic? All right, so a couple of things here. Obviously, Casey Keeler, and to the second part of your question here, Mike TB31. Again, we've talked a lot about how far behind Temple got on NIL. We have talked about the fact that Arthur Johnson mentioned at the fall NIL event that, hey, we again, I'm very much paraphrasing here, could have done a better job with NIL. Yes, Arthur Johnson and Casey Keeler have had conversations about NIL. I do think that he will be able to make the adjustment from going from Sam Houston State, which until recently had been an FCS program, to being an FBS program and navigating those waters. I mean, from what I've been able to gather, I think they have a very, very keen idea of what they can do, how they can do it, the money that that they might be working with through the Tough Fund. I know that conversations have taken place about revenue share and where that's going to stand. So yes, I think he'll be able to navigate it in a very alert and modern way. I think there are going to be more. I think KC, just because, and this is where, when, if people were, I don't know ultimately what someone like Elijah Robinson would have been able to do as Temple's head football coach. He might have been just fine. And I think the world of Elijah. But when Arthur Johnson talked about wanting to get somebody with head coaching experience, this is part of what comes into play here. I think KC, from what I've been able to gather, has a very, very good and sharp idea of what they want to do with NIL, how they want to handle it, how it should be tiered, what they want to allocate to certain positions, and what their goals are. So, yeah, so from what I'm hearing, Mike TB31, so far so good on that front. Obviously, as everyone knows, Temple doesn't have collectives that are bringing in money at an Alabama or LSU level, but I think Casey Keeler so far has a good idea, and that would involve his staff, and that would involve his general manager Clayton Barnes, who we've talked about already. I think they have a pretty good idea of how to run things, and I think they're coming to a place like Temple and saying, "Hey, this is more than what we had at Sam Houston State." So I wouldn't look at him and say, "Oh man, he's for the most part been an FCS coach. He's going to be in over his skis here." I don't think that's going to be the case. I think they have a very good idea of how to structure this, how to tier this, and I think so far, again, we'll see. Very early on, we haven't even covered spring ball yet. I think people will be fairly impressed with how he has approached that. Next question here from the message board. The screen name is Joe Becca, one of our longtime subscribers. Update on Jameel Brown as for the reasons why he's out and reasons for Dylan Batiste DNP last night. Seems like he could have helped last night. Jameel Brown, again, out due to personal reasons. We have reported on our message board that he could be a likely medical red shirt. Again, it's not disciplinary. It's not academic. I think the world of Jameel. I think he's a great kid. He's just dealing with some stuff off the court. I would be mildly surprised if he comes back to play this year. I don't profess, and I think there might be a mailbag question about this a little bit later on. I don't profess to know what the future holds for him, but I don't think this is I know this is not a situation where he dipped his toe in the water at Temple and said, I don't like it. I'm just going to sit around and then enter the portal. It's nothing, nothing like that. Reasons for Dylan Batiste DNP. We had a couple questions about this. I get it. Dylan Batiste was a very athletic player. He's a legacy recruit. He's Derek Batiste's son. Kind of just a bit of a tweener at this point. Like last night, they were playing against a lot of wings against ECU. Could he have potentially helped them on a night when they got brutally outscored in the paint? Yeah, maybe so. Again, I get it. He was a highly regarded recruit. I get that Babatunde Dorodola. I mean, we probably should lump this in. I'll lump this in with TUL's 08's question. For the love of God, why aren't we seeing Batiste over Baba? Baba is terrible. I don't think Babatunde Dorodola is terrible. I think he is hitting a freshman wall. I know that, TUL's 08, you probably know this. I'm sure you know this. You're a dedicated Temple fan. You're talking about a guy who reclassified, came to the program in late August. Adam Fisher and his staff are not beyond reproach. They're not beyond criticism. I'm not saying everything that they do is gold and that you can't question their coaching moves, but there's probably a reason why Baba is starting and why Dylan is not. There might be some things that aren't showing up in practice. Again, Dylan's a great kid. There are no issues there. There's nothing disciplinary going on. There's nothing academically going on. He's a good athlete, but at 6'8", I think he's around 210. He's a bit of a tweener in certain situations. Some of it's matchup based. He's also a true freshman. And it's almost like that term doesn't apply in today's college basketball anymore. It's an instant gratification thing. I know that sounds boomerish, but look at what Quante Berry is doing as a guy that was a fairly highly touted recruit who was good enough to go to Providence. Now he's playing. He's starting over Lingrier the third. I'm not saying that to single out Lynn. Dylan is allowed to get better. They're just situationally, I think some of it's situational stuff. Not saying he's not going to play again the rest of this year, but I understand why fans are asking that question.
I also have I think a lot of it is matchup based. Like Adam said that himself, that it's matchup based. But I think also it kind of reminds me a little bit of the Zion situation from last year, where Zion played in the early parts of non-conference, showed some promise, got hurt
Yep.
with ankle injury, and then you didn't really see him much towards the end of non-conference and the beginning of conference play. And a lot of that was freshman stuff. A lot of that was things that they saw in practice that they wanted him to get better with. And then look at what he's doing now. He had the full off season with Temple. He's more integrated into the offense. I mean, put up. Obviously, he didn't make the free throw or the layup last night, which I'm sure people are upset about. But he still has developed from where he was last year to this year. I think like there are similarities in those two aspects, even though they're not the same position. And it's kind of a little bit of a different scenario, but I feel like there's some similarities with the Zion situation last year and the Dylan Petit situation this year.
Another question here pertaining to basketball from D-Blaze75. Why didn't Temple go to zone earlier against ECU? They love to go downhill and live by the rim with some poor 3-point percentage numbers on the season. Seemed pretty obvious. Fair question. We were not down there. I was not down in Greenville covering the game last night, something I can talk to Adam about in the future. But yeah, I mean, they did, they switched up to zone, with some mixed results. But yeah, it was a solid adjustment at the time. If you're a fan, do you look at things and say, hey, yeah, you wish that they would have gone zone earlier? Yeah, absolutely. Sure. You look at the numbers in terms of how they were outscored in the paint. Yeah, they could have gone to zone earlier. Fair question. I'll tip my cap to Adam and say, hey, at least you did it. They did it. It's not like they did on the last couple of possessions of the game. Sure, they could have done it earlier. Fair point. I still think that they have no one to blame but themselves in terms of like how they did not rebound. Another thing, and again, I'm not sitting here talking to Adam Fisher right now. I would guess and take an educated guess is to say what maybe gives him some pause and hesitation is it is sometimes harder, generally speaking, to rebound out of a zone, and they are already a bad rebounding team as it is. But a fair question. I think there are probably some elements that go into that. So yes, it does seem pretty obvious if like, hey, ECU was actually hitting it from a slightly better clip from three. They certainly didn't shoot it like Temple did last night. Great question. Could they have gone to zone earlier? Yes, but I still think that they really fumbled this game away. That bad inbounds pass from St. Dzoni had nothing to do with zone. Jamal Mashburn Jr., hate to rip on him here. He's a great player. He's the best scorer Temple's had in quite some time. He had 3 bad turnovers last night. Lot of careless passes. Obviously the Shane's inbound pass hurt them, but sure. But I think there were some other self-inflicted wounds there that contributed to the loss. But I actually would be. It's a great prompt for a question, DBlay75. I appreciate it because I do want to ask. Thinking about it now, I want to ask Adam: are there challenges now if you want to go zone to compensate for maybe your lack of size, or if a team is beating you up in the paint, they're getting to the rim at will, you go zone. Does that affect you as a poor rebounding team, or do you say, hey, they're maybe out of a zone, it forces them to take some threes, maybe it creates some long rebounds, and he's talked about that. Like we want our guards to rebound, so maybe that is not a factor in his decision. Great question. Can't say I have the answer to it, but fair question. They did have some mixed success with it last night, but again, between the I don't want to say lack of size. They have some size. It's just not always playing incredibly well. But between that and the rebounding, a huge concern for the team right now. Got one more question here, and then one, Dante, if you have time for one, I want to throw one at you, another football-related question, since it's, I love seeing you, I love spending time with you. I want to make the most out of our time. I got a question, a mailbag question from John DeCarlo to close things out for you. But the screen name here, Malenko, another longtime subscriber, has a two-part question. Question number one, will Temple participate in revenue sharing with their student athletes? Do you think the American Athletic Conference will require it and create a minimum floor teams have to meet? The answer is yes. Again, I would love to get Tim Pernetti on a future podcast. He is the American Athletic Conference commissioner, former AD at Rutgers. Yeah, and I think that if you read just anything that's out there from Tim Pernetti, I think Tim's pretty serious about making sure that, that he hasn't said it like this, but like, hey, we can walk and chew gum at the same time here. We can be great academic institutions, but we want the athletic programs in this conference to be invested. So back over the summer, Tim Pernetti told a friend of mine, Eric Prisbell from On3, back in July, the exact quote from the story was, I do think it's important that we set a floor. So all our institutions are investing at a minimum level. It's important just to create more competitive balance. So he's been pretty consistent with that. Eric and I used to work at the Daily Journal together in Gannett. Eric was a student at Rutgers and was interning for us, and he has gone on to like an awesome career. Eric's a really, really good dude. And again, you can go back and read that story. But yes, Tim Pernetti has been on the record saying, yes, schools in our conference are going to have to make an investment. So yes, and we know just through talking to people as well that yes, Temple is going to be participating in revenue sharing. I know that conversations have gone on between Arthur Johnson and the football staff about that and what that's going to look like. And I'm sure they're going to have conversations about that with the other athletic teams as well at Temple. So the answer to that question is yes. Question number 2, should Temple schedule Delaware and or Villanova in football on a regular basis to create more interest? Well, Delaware is now an FBS program entering Conference USA. You could have the Casey Keeler Bowl. I don't know if that's on the schedule for the future. It certainly would be cool, certainly would be interesting. Then now Delaware again, I don't know, like athletic budgets come into this. People ask all the time, why is basketball scheduling Holy Family? Why are they scheduling a D2 team? There's money involved here, there's availability involved, but sure, hell, I'd love to see it. Whether Temple goes down to play at Delaware, you can no longer, if you're Temple, you can no longer look at Delaware and say, oh, we don't want to schedule that game because they're really good. Or same thing with Villanova. It used to be said in the past. What did they call it? The Mayor's Cup, when Al Golden was at Temple and Andy Talley beat them, and they needed a late Brandon McManus field goal one year to beat Villanova. And sometimes people would say, why are you playing Nova? Yes, it draws fans, but if you beat them, you were supposed to beat them. If you lose to them, it's a dangerous game. It hurts you. But again, Delaware is an FBS team now. They're in Conference USA. They're investing in football. Villanova continues to be a good FCS program. So yeah, I'd be all for it. Don't know if it's gonna happen, but we'll see. Dante, to close us out, one of the questions I wanted to ask you about too, is I'm thinking mailbag questions is, I don't know, like when you're evaluating prospects now, and I'm sure other people have asked you about this, and it gets talked about. When you're evaluating prospects, there's like probably like the little the added extra steps now where if you're watching, and maybe he's not a great example because he has gone to 3 schools. Let's look at a guy like Dylan Gabriel. He was at UCF when you were in college, right?
Yep.
So you're watching UCF film, you're watching Oklahoma film, then you're watching Oregon film. There's the literal like extra steps of watching guys at different schools. But are you seeing a tangible difference now with guys coming out into the draft that hop around, that don't get the benefit of being developed at one place at one time, where there's continuity, where like we've mentioned this in several podcasts. I know you had the joy of covering the Rod Carey era, and the one positive quote that we get some mileage out of for, Rod had a good first season, then he was around for COVID in 2020, and it just was a train wreck after that, as you know. The one thing that Rod would say that did I think lend some credence, it was a solid quote, was he would say, guys are allowed to get better. And I used to think about that and say, yeah, guys, it's the developmental sport. But when you're evaluating guys now, is it a different ball game now because guys jump around so much? Do you think it has helped guys, hurt guys? I know it's probably talked about a million times in scouting circles, but what does that look like now when you're evaluating guys when they have gone to like 3, 4 different schools sometimes?
Yeah, it's a really good question. What I would say is I do think it's a little bit too early to make
Mhm.
really big claims about that. I feel like we're just starting to see some of those guys leak into the pros last year and then this year. What I will say is that I think the early returns are overwhelmingly positive, because a lot of the times, again, not every player, but for the guys that I evaluate for the draft, they usually meet a baseline level of, hey, they're good enough.
Mhm.
And so what we see with those guys is that they're transferring to places where they get on the field,
Yep.
right? And so you just get an opportunity to showcase yourself a lot more, right? So I'm not the biggest Dylan Gabriel guy. I was not
Mhm.
the biggest Dylan Gabriel guy when he was at UCF. I didn't think he was good at Oklahoma. I have a lot of questions about his pro um, applications, if you will, even in Oregon. What I will tell you is that coming into this season, I would have told you he was not a draftable quarterback prospect.
Yeah.
Now I think he's going to get drafted. Where that ends up being, I couldn't tell you. And even if you look at, I think quarterback specifically, you're starting to see guys who, you know, some guys maybe bounce around a little bit too much, right? Like I'm thinking about like TJ Finley. I think he was like a 4 or 5 star guy who started at Auburn. He's going to play for like his fourth or fifth school
Mhm.
this year or something like that. So you have players like that where you're just like, no, dude, come on now. Like, enough. But like, you also have players like Bo Nix, right? Who played a lot of college football. And I didn't love him coming out of Oregon either, but he was a good quarterback prospect. He got significantly better at Oregon. Michael Penix Jr. is the same thing, went from Indiana to Washington, got a lot better. And you're seeing those players return on investment in the NFL. They're just
Yeah.
a little bit ready to play because they played a lot more college football. Jaden Daniels went from Arizona State to LSU. He spent 2 years at LSU.
Yeah.
And so, you're starting to see that. So I would say the early returns have been really good. As I cracked a joke about not envying having to cover the current landscape of college football like you guys do. And I did truly mean that. But at the same time, I think for the players, I am happy that they get the opportunity to make these decisions for themselves. And I think for the players who have pro talent, it has overwhelmingly been positive so far. What I will say though is it is an absolute nightmare trying to track what year guys are and where they've played college football. It is the number of times I've had to go, I did not know that player transferred has been astronomical. And we've probably done like 90 reports for the 33rdteam.com. So we're like not even a third of the way through the class. So it's interesting for sure. But look, at the end of the day, like, you got to get on the field to get better. And I think
Yep.
a lot of these guys are getting on the field and they're getting an opportunity. Now, I think a lot of college coaches will push back on that guys who shouldn't be transferring are transferring. I only see the guys who have NFL prospects. So it's
Right.
easy for me to sit here and be like, these guys are making great decisions. They're getting drafted in the NFL, whatever. So we'll see. Overall, but for players who can hack it athletically, I think it's been an overwhelmingly positive development.
Dante, we love you. Johnny, love you too, buddy. I'm glad that you guys got to spend some time together here on Zoom. Two OwlScoop generations interacting, building bridges,
Yeah.
sharing trivia questions. So, Dante Collinelli, the 33rd team deputy editor, big thank you for joining us on the Scoop. Johnny, thank you for all you do. Kyle, as well. We will be back next week to talk more football, more recruiting developments, more hoops, anything else you guys want to put on the agenda. We appreciate you guys listening. As always, the subscriber numbers continue to grow, the listenership numbers continue to grow. Really appreciate that. And we will talk to you next week.